got everyone here who's supposed to be here. So I'm Sam. I've probably met a handful of you guys on site or at other trainings before. I work for Novaspect. We are guys in charge of the Delta V on site at Westcott and soon to be Maplewood and Sibley when those get done as well. And I know it's a new control system, and some of you guys are new. You two are. I don't know about Dave. I think has been around for a little while. I'm not sure your name. John. So some of the newer guys might be slightly easier to pick up, but some of the older guys might, it's gonna be, you're gonna have to forget a couple of things of how an old system worked compared to the new one. Just kind of some of the terminology around it. But we'll go over it all, and if you guys seriously have any questions, just let me know, and we can work through them and talk about them. And if there's anything specifically that you guys have seen on site that you guys want to see again or have me explain to you, we've got a lot of the graphics and system should be relatively simulated here, so that we can kind of run through some of that stuff. So, the first thing we're going to go over is just logging in and logging off. So the plan in the future is to have everyone have a unique username to log into the Delta V system. This is going to be done so that we can keep track of who's on, who's there, and then what changes happen so that they can see, ask questions about what happened that night or whatever happened, things like that, or what you saw. And so a way to do it, so I'm not sure, it might be a little slightly small up there, but so up in this kind of upper right hand corner, there'll be like a tag. It'll be basically the name of your computer / what user you are. So it's like if I'm in there, it'll say /Sam Tarshni or whatever for my user, or Dave.
So is that how it is now?
It is now.
It's gonna be.
So it is going to be, I think it's Chuck, the guy who's maybe in charge of all that. He wants to start working on getting some of those usernames there. So right now, the login for the operator is just, I'll show you here. So if you click this name up here, you'll get this login. You won't see the bottom half. That's kind of just special for this one. But there'll be a drop down with a list of names, so you don't need to remember your username. You can just see it in there. So for now, at your site, it's going to be operator is your username, and just operator is your password. Like I said, I think that's probably going to change here in the next week.
Okay.
But for now, that's the password. I guess it's not on this system. But that is the plan. So if you do that, you take your username, type in your password, just hit enter. You'll see the username appear change. It is to make sure you can. So then say, end of your shift, you want to hand it over. You can either decide to log off then or log off, have the next guy log off. But you probably don't want the next guy to log you off because they might not log you off and they might just keep you in there. So if you click that name again, that same login shows up and there's a log off button, which will just give you no user in there. So that's kind of logging in and logging off. Pretty easy. It's just that button up there in the top with the name in it. And like I said, I know the plan is going to be hopefully within the next week, kind of trying to do it before we try to start, running everything, will be to get the username and passwords in there. And I know, Excel will be communicating passwords and stuff with everyone. And with those usernames and everything, there are different privileges. So, operators are going to have different privileges than, say, me as an engineer who's going out there. I can make changes, do things. Our operators are the one who give the privileges to interact with the plant, alarms, different things like that is kind of the big thing. So, moving on here. So this up here that you see on the screen is your operator interface, is what we're going to call it. And this is going to have a few different options here. So up top we've got our menu bar, and those are just going to have a bunch of buttons on there. It's going to have like a search bar and a few other things like that, and we'll go over those buttons in a little bit. Right underneath that, where you kind of see this instrument air pressure, PSD, and sight mode, that's a custom toolbar we've made. I think those are the main three things that we've added into there, is just if you're in a plant shutdown, what your sight mode is, and then the instrument air pressure throughout the plant. I know we have plenty of more room in there, so if you guys are kind of working through things and you want something to be added there, if we're kind of on site, just let us know and we can add it pretty quickly. Underneath that, this one does look slightly different than what it is on the site, but there'll be these drop downs. Typically our drop downs are, I think on site, are basically separated between liquefaction and vaporization. You know, all the displays that are going to be associated with vaporization are going to be in a drop down, as well as then all the, you know, liquefaction ones are in a drop down as well. So that's kind of a way you can, you know, navigate to different displays, as well as there's going to be some back forward buttons and a home button, but we'll kind of show you that a little bit more. So underneath that is going to be your main working area. That's where you're going to see all your graphics. That's where you interact with things, open, close valves, do whatever you need to, load, unload a compressor. That's all going to happen in this main area. This is where you'll read all your values, see everything in your plant, and like I said, interact with it. And then down at the bottom, I don't have any alarms here on this one, but if you guys have been at Westcott, you've probably seen it just flooded with alarms there down on the bottom. So the alarm banner there at the bottom will show, you know, your alarms in your site there. And it kind of, yeah.
You have a sandbox feature where you can use a generic plugin, you can click around without affecting anything in the plant.
So we don't. I think they are going to have a, you know, simulation system as far as I know on site, but I don't know exactly what the plan is. We don't. I mean, I think we could make like a view only account where you wouldn't be able to like click like open, close anything or do anything, but you can like open stuff up and see what it's saying, but you wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't like, you know, be able to test it running through a startup or anything like that.
So there is, just Sam, I mean, based on what I know, so the contract is that we will have what Nova Spec calls a simulator, similar to what Sam's going to show you here.
Yep.
You'll be allowed to play on these screens, but it doesn't integrate with any of the plant.
Yep, and that's what I was asking.
Yeah, but it also doesn't have a model behind it, so you can manipulate something, you know, to see how it looks, but in terms of, like if you start a pump or something or open a valve, you're not going to see system response on the screen.
That would be so nice. You
I'm
know,
working on that.
to inject 20-degree temperature change across the heat exchanger to simulate rain coming in.
Yep.
You know, I mean,
Yep.
that's what I will struggle with that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, because stuff like that, you know, there's people that have been around there like, well, yeah, if that happens, you know, huge barometer change with a big inch rainfall, you know, your plant's swinging like crazy.
Yep.
Well, you know, it'd be nice to be like, well, let's watch and see what happens.
All right, so like I said, that alarm banner there at the bottom is going to show you your alarms, and those alarms there, I think they can fit about 8 alarms on the bottom, but across the 3 screens, so you can get about 24 alarms there across the bottom. They are, what's the word here I'm trying to think of? I kind of lost the train. Oh, so they're filtered by alarm priority and then alarm and its acknowledged state. So if alarm comes in and it's unacknowledged, it'll be the top of the list. And then after that, it's going to go by priority. So your like higher priority alarms, we have a couple different options. I think we have like something called a supercritical or a critical alarm or a warning, and then like typically advisory are kind of the big ones. It'll go down in, you know, severity of those, and so you'll see them. So you'll see the most severe alarms up first.
Will you see those alarms first, or will you see the unacknowledged first?
You will see the unacknowledged first, but then, like I said, the unacknowledged is also going to, so if you have a bunch of unacknowledged alarms coming at once, it'll be
Right.
by
Yeah.
severity, and then after they're acknowledged, it'll be severity again. So, up here is this menu bar like we've talked about. And there's a bunch of buttons. We're on page 5 as well if you guys want to change here. There's a list of options here about what these buttons are and what they do. So if you ever forget, you can go look back at this sheet and they'll be right there. A couple of the big ones I think are going to be very helpful to you guys is this first one is a search function. And it's going to search, pretty much just like, anything, like a web browser or whatever. You search for a display either by name or like description will show up, same thing with a module and things like that. So like I'll just search up like C201 to start. And it'll give me anything that has C201, kind of either in the description or name of it. And then if I search up compressor, I could see, 107, 201, 301, and all that stuff, all those things under compressor as well. And then if
Like
I
one, just so.
Yeah, sorry.
You click one after you.
Yep, sorry.
I'm just curious to see it.
So yeah, we'll look at the C201. We'll just open up the gas flow. So you scroll down, I'm just looking here. So if you click on it just like that, it'll open up its faceplate. And then they have a bunch of these other buttons on there as well. So that first one there is your open your faceplate. And then the next is open your detail display. If you hover over it, it'll tell you everything. And then the next is the primary control. So pretty much if you're on a different screen and you click that button, it'll take you to whatever screen that module, flow meter or valve or whatever is going to be on. And then the next is a control studio thing, and that's kind of more for the engineers. And then finally the process history view, which you'll be able to see, trends and things like that. But we'll go over how to make trends a little bit easier as well. So then the next one that I think is important is the tools. It's the wrench and the screwdriver kind of crossed over each other. So this has a few different things. On the main one that you guys will probably want to change is the themes. And the themes, there's I think 5 different themes that you can do that kind of change the whole theme. So that goes dark blue, dark gray, light blue, and tan, the big ones. So this is just the default, which is the light blue. If I switch it to dark blue, kind of get that dark blue shade. Then we've got dark gray. Light blue, like I said again, has that default one, and then tan. So it looked like an operator had done, or someone had put it to like dark gray on site, and then I think yesterday or 2 days ago when I was there, I don't remember who it was, but they were asking how to change it. Yeah, they wanted to change it to light blue. Just a little bit easier, I think, to look at, but on night shift, I probably wouldn't want to look at this either. I'd probably switch it to dark gray as well. So, moving on, this refresh button, that little circle button, the refresh button, looks pretty similar to, say, like a web browser or something. So this is going to be kind of important as we are, still kind of working with your site and doing things like that, because you can see it on the sheet, there's a little yellow star that shows up on it. And if you ever see that star, just hit that button. Nothing will change. So like if I hit it, what it's going to do is it's just going to go and grab the newest version of the graphics. So if we made a change, you'll see, then that light will turn on and do it. So if you want us to say, move a valve somewhere or something like that, and we do it, that's the only way you'll be able to see it. Or make something be able to easier to read or anything like that. You'll see a little star up there, and you can hit that, and it'll refresh what you've got.
So the star shows up.
Yep.
Refresh button.
Yep.
Overlapping or something.
Yeah, it's like on it. I think it's pretty clear to see once you see it. you know, I think some of the guys on site have just forgotten. I've just kind of been letting them know as I've been there. If I make any changes, I'll let them know and they can refresh it and have those new changes.
So there's no automatic update for changes?
No. So yeah, the changes needs to be hit that refresh. So this next button is your alarm list. If you click this, it'll open up your alarm list. Like I said, this doesn't have any alarms on it right now. But on site, I think you have like a ton of them that we're gonna try to, you know, get us slightly out of the way while we're working on getting things checked out. But they all show up here, and once again, it's, you know, acknowledged status will always go up to, if they're unacknowledged, they'll always be at the top. And then from there, they are filtered and sorted by severity as well as time in. So say like if you get 2 critical alarms, the most recent one will stay up at the top and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it is. On this next button, will be grayed out, but you can see, so say if someone has suppressed an alarm, so say you have a, you know, bad transmitter or something that's constantly giving you alarm and you just don't want it there, and you know, Kyle or someone puts the alarm out of service for you, and you're curious what's out of service. If you click that, it'll show a list of what's out of service. It'll look just like this alarm list, but it'll just say suppressed alarm list. So the next one I think will be important for you guys, the ones I've seen people use, is this display tag settings. It'll be either like the last or second to last button, kind of depending on what's open on your screen. And what this does is it will, let me switch back here. It will change what the display tags say, kind of above, like say of this valve here, we see it read as FCV C104. That's because it's set to a friendly name. You kind of have some options. You can do the tag, the module tag, and this is what Delta V knows it as. And that's what you'd also see on the faceplate. So the module tag is what you see up here on the faceplate. If you change it to friendly name, like I said, it'll show you kind of what we have as our friendly name, which we've tried to match our friendly name to be exactly what you guys had on SciTech. So, you know, on SciTech, you look at this and it'd say FCV C104. So that way you kind of are familiar with it instead of just trying to completely forget kind of what you know. And then you can also do no display, but that one's, you know, if you don't know what anything is, it's going to be impossible for you to really interact and be able to operate well. But at least it unclutters the screen a lot.
Did you click on a description one?
Yeah, so the description typically won't necessarily fit all the way, but it'll give you a first, you know, 16 or so characters of it, of the full description. And so if I open up this this valve again, it's the same description you'll see down here underneath the module tag.
Okay.
So I think the site has kind of always left it as friendly name since we've gotten there. So the other thing you can do in this display tag is you can change the font size of the numbers so you can read them a little bit easier.
When we first seen our first screenshots of Delta V,
Yeah.
it was not friendly.
It was not.
No, it
Okay.
was whatever the other one.
The module tag probably.
And
Yep.
we were like,
You're like, I have no idea what this
the
means.
screen's super busy, you know.
Yep.
And so, I don't know if friendly name came up after that, or if it was always there.
Yeah, I
See
think-
it, but-
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it was.
that, when we saw that, it was like, you know.
Yep.
So,
So yeah, some of them we kind of don't have a friendly name on. So like, just like down here, you know, we have our tank level and our tank pressure. We don't really have, you know.
well, after we get more familiar with
Friendly
that
name,
and
yeah.
the module stuff,
Yep.
I guess just maybe go back to that.
Mhm. Yeah. But yeah, so the friendly name is kind of what it is now.
And like you said, it's because of what we're used to on those.
Exactly. Yep. Tried to make it, you know, it's not an easy change, right? So we try to simplify it when we can. So like I said, the big thing also in this display tag settings is your size as well. So you can change the font size so you can read it easier. So you see the numbers kind of get a little bigger. This shouldn't normally cause any overlap, but it might cause some overlap in certain spots. Yeah,
When you change a parameter on the display tag, does that stay with your profile?
it does not.
So you have to change it every time you log in.
Yes.
Yeah, I was looking at that, don't change.
Yep. I think it might be something we could look into, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
What does it default to when you do log in?
So it'll just stick with whatever was as the past. But if you like say the computer logs out, you have to log back in. It's 9.5. Right? Because 9.5 is kind of where it goes to.
So when you log back in, you're logging into prior users'
Settings basically.
settings.
Yep, on the display tag as well as the theme. And then as well, you'll see the time and date kind of up here, right by the name. So you can watch the time countdown for when your shift's over.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe not.
All right, so some more terminology, just kind of, you might hear me say it, and it might be, I don't know, maybe different from what you guys are used to. This first one probably will be. So on the screen, if there is a value or a valve or something on there, we typically call that a gem. It's just kind of the Emerson's word for what they call it. And that's something you can click on and it'll pull up a faceplate. And a faceplate is kind of where you can interact with or read into more detail about what the value is or what's going on in the module.
So you said, like,
The gem. So yeah, that's like basically, you click on the valve, click on the value here, like you click on this, you get your C145 class flow. But I don't think you'll probably hear anyone but maybe an engineer call it a gem realistically. So if you call it, a valve or a reading or whatever, it'll work as well. So, like I've kind of brought up a few times here, this is a faceplate. A faceplate, like I said, is where you can interact with modules you can interact with. So like a PID loop, a control valve, a discrete input-output valve, or like a pump or compressor, whatever. What this does is it gives you more information, more readings about what's actually happening there, as well as more buttons and things you can do from there. So typically, if you want to make changes, you'll want to open up the faceplate to start or stop a pump or open close a valve is where you'll see that the most.
Can you trend those parameters over time?
Yep. So yeah, right here is your chart builder. This is where you can read that. And this will have however many buttons you can trend basically, what we're recording in our historian. So this is a control loop. So we have our process variable recorded, our set point that we're trying to control it to, as well as our output, say on a valve. Those are all recorded, and you can make a chart with that. And so a way you can do that is, so on this faceplate, like I said, this chart builder, if you just click one of these things, you'll see it add to the chart up here. And with that, you can also add more things to it. So say I just want that value as well as, let's say, let's do this one, our CO2 out. We can add this to it and it'll just add straight to that chart builder. And you can add 8 things to it at one time. And you can go back in time for 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, and 1 day, just from here. You can go back as long as you've been running, but just to kind of get the graph started, it'll just show you the last hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, or a day, and you can move from there. So then you just choose that, and you hit build chart. This isn't probably going to work here because we're not recording anything. But on your site, it'll pop up with a graph, and it'll have all your values there. I know we've kind of had it before, or we've had some operators, throw up the tank 2 pressure to kind of trend that, so they could turn on your boil-off compressors when they need to and things like that. Just kind of, some of the things I've seen.
Say you built this chart.
Yep.
And later on, you're like, oh, I want to add another point to that chart. So this would start to build the chart on you, then go and add another point to that existing chart.
Yep, so you do that through the graph that shows up. The process history view is what it will be called. And there's like a chart drop down. You can just say add point, and you can just type what you want to add. So unfortunately, it's a little cumbersome to do that. I think the easiest way to add points is just to make a new chart using this chart builder. I think it's faster. It's a little bit easier. So then if you want to get rid of something.
So and then here's something that I talked to you about this last couple days. On the one computer in there, the operator computer, they have another icon on the top of their screen that they can click, and it'll bring
Yep.
up a stacked view of all the charts they have made.
Yeah.
The read side does not do that.
Yep. So yeah, I think I figured out what that is. It's just a change I need to make on my end to make that work. But
Can you pull up a chart now?
I can't because we're not recording any values on here, unfortunately.
Because I would like to know, like if you build a chart with T1 and T2's tank pressure, the y-axis is different on each one.
Yep. So it shows two y-axes.
Yes, it does.
Yep.
I don't know why. I like to run them with the same. They
Yeah.
pretty well follow each other anyways.
Yep.
But that's why I like to run them the same, because I like to compare them together.
Yeah. Yep. No, I understand. Like I
There's
said,
a change we
unfortunately.
can make in the field so they do run together. So you don't want one pressure running vastly different than the other.
Yeah.
Because then you're gonna bump into alarm limits on that one tank where you can't really change. If you keep them together, they stay together.
Yep.
So
Nope.
at some point,
Yeah. No.
it's
Like,
almost like it'd be nice to have a sheet, if we can't do it here, a guide,
Yeah.
and maybe this in here.
Yeah,
Have
I
us
don't remember
how to
exactly.
change them. How to change say make the y-axis 0 or 1.
Yep.
On both, as opposed to 0 or 1 on T2 and 0 or 1.5 on T1 is how it comes up now.
Yep. No, yeah, we can for sure do that. Like I said, I can, take a look at it on site when I'm there the next couple of days as well, and show you and maybe write something up for everyone. Or what we can do is we can make a chart that we just save that the operators can open and close.
Yeah, that would be pretty nice.
With the tank pressure, just one y-axis.
View chart,
Yep. So we can either leave it where it's just kind of always behind you, behind your screens, or not, right? Just some of the ideas that popping into my head. But yeah, unfortunately, like I said, this system here isn't historizing any of our data, so we're unfortunately not really able to build any charts. All right, so from this faceplate, like we've kind of been talking about here, there's a couple things you can do with it. So you don't need to pin it anymore. I turned that off for you guys. So if you open up a faceplate, it'll stay open until you close it, which is kind of something that I think everyone, you just forget about it. And when you forget about it, it's annoying to have to reopen it. I get annoyed with it too. So we're not doing that, but what you can do is there's this above like the modes, there's a little caret. I think it might be tough to see up there, but I'm hovering over it. If you click that, what this will do is it'll bring up like a little mini faceplate, which will just show you, the information just like you need. Your value, your set point, your output, and what mode you're in. And you can interact with it here as well. So if I want to change, say, what the output is, or what my mode is, I can do all that from here. And if I click that arrow again, it'll open up the full-size faceplate as well. So on this faceplate here, we'll go more into detail of each faceplate we're going to go over, but they'll typically have like a mode right here, and you have your options to select your mode. I know the modes have been kind of confusing for kind of what we've been used to in the past for you guys. So we'll go over those in more detail later on, but just kind of some of the ones you'll see would be manual, auto, cascade, and remote. Cascade and remote out will be the main 5. Typically though, you'll only interact with those first 3, manual, auto, and cascade. So from this faceplate, you can open up a detailed display, which is kind of this button down here. It has a little magnifying glass on it. And this is where you would find your alarm limits, your high limit, high, low, deviation alarms, whatever other alarms are there. You can see your limits there if they're enabled. Depending on the privileges, I think we're at least talking about changing some privileges here around alarms, about either being able to shelve an alarm for a certain amount of time, like I've talked about. An alarm is, say, if a transmitter is bad, being able to shelve the alarm for a certain amount of time. You can do that from here. As well as, like I said, if you have, it's a loop, this is maybe a little more engineering side, but they have some other, tuning parameters and different things like that that'll show up here.
Okay, so one more question.
Yeah.
When you say you shelve an alarm, that puts it basically in bypass, correct?
So yeah, the shelving the alarm basically, turns it off.
Is there a box there that put in a reason why you
Yes, there will be.
bypass that?
Yep.
Does it automatically prompt you to put in a reason?
So yeah, this one's not because I have different privileges logged in right now, but if
Correct.
you click it, what it'll do is it'll pull up.
That's what I'm asking. Does
Yep.
it require you to put in a reason for why
Yes.
you're bypassing?
Yes, it does. So on site, we were testing it yesterday.
Okay.
It'll pull up a thing and it'll have a bunch of reasons, as well as a time limit for how long you want to shelve it for.
Okay.
So you can't just shelve it forever.
Mhm.
It'll come back at some point. And then,
Automatically.
yep,
Does it put in the username also?
after the time. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yep, so based on your username, it'll have a reason for why you did it, as well as a timer for how long it's shelved.
Well, it puts one of those in, you better be mindful of the time limit,
Mhm.
because it's up we had before we're ready to.
Yep. So yeah, the idea with the time limit is just in case, say, you forget about it or something like that. There is another option called putting the alarm out of service, which you will need higher privileges to do.
Mhm.
And those that would just put the alarm out of service indefinitely until you put it back in place. And like I said, there's a suppressed alarm list right next to the alarm list button, and that'll give you your, what's it called? I can't think of it. Oh, all the alarms that are either out of service or shelved will show up. So another thing you can do with these faceplates is you can minimize them. Just kind of like a window, something you have on your computer, a window you have open on your computer. And if you notice up here on this menu bar, another button kind of shows up. And if I click it, faceplate opens up again, and that button goes away. So you will see if you have more apps open kind of in the background, if you have like say process history view like Dave was talking about, or say a faceplate, you'll see the buttons there knowing that you have something kind of behind your operator screen that you can click and get to. And so if you say minimize several of these faceplates and you click it, it'll show you the list of all of them you have minimized. Say if you just want to like hide it until, as you're moving around the screen until you get there, it's a good option for you. And you can close them from there, or open them back up.
And Sam, those face plates remain minimized even if you go to a vaporization screen.
Yep. Yep. So if I minimize this, and let's just move to the vaporization screen. And if I open that back up, it'll stay there.
Okay.
As well as it'll stay open no matter where you go, kind of within your screen.
So that would allow you to monitor, let's say, tank pressure and oil off
Yep.
while you're doing another evolution. Okay.
Yep, and so that's kind of another good option for, say, kind of making it a mini version as well. So you can kind of put it off in the corner and keep an eye on it and not actually have to have it block everything.
Yeah, at the top, we have 3 of these screens there, so.
Right, yeah.
One on, oil off,
Mhm.
you know. That's typically what we do, this
Sure.
one on, oil off, and this one on. Kind of the
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's, yeah, without the 3 screens, that would be a really.
Yeah, with all 3 doing what you're doing, it would be
Yeah.
Yep,
completely necessary, but with 3,
yeah,
to be honest.
yep.
Do you guys have a protocol yet on which 3 screens you normally have?
No.
Okay.
But normally,
It's probably.
we all leave them. the
Lead
same.
operator.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
normally either,
So,
the heavy hitters are the same for everybody, you know, but.
Sure.
Dave, if you let me know what those 3 are and which ones you want, what we can do is we can set it up basically as the home of that screen. So if you hit the home button, it'll take you to that screen. So say if you want like your vaporization screen, your boil off compressor, and your absorber
So
page.
2 of them are pretty much always the same. You got
Yep.
your holding, C102 and 103
Yep.
one. The lead needs the tank, the foundation heating
Yep.
daily. And then the 3rd one, whether we're in liquefaction or vaporization season, that one comes soon back.
Okay, perfect.
So I don't know what you wanna make for a home for that.
Yeah.
one, but.
Doesn't necessarily matter. I think
No.
the default home right now is just this page right here, the overview screen. This is our default right now.
And this is what I would call liquefaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
You could almost set it up seasonally.
Yeah, Sam, do that. From November 30th, it's.
Well, why not? I mean, that's how you guys would.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Possibility for that.
Got to. When I'm on site tomorrow, I can take a look at kind of what we want to do.
Just don't start everything with Dave said. Appreciate that.
I'll just say Jeremy said. That's kind of what I've used. All right. So, kind of, maybe stopping here for a minute and kind of just going over, making sure we kind of understand some of the moving around different screens. So these buttons up here, kind of in our navigation window, or pane is what we're calling it. You'll have these drop downs to get to different displays, as well as these kind of back and forth and home buttons. So if you were to, open up a bunch of different screens, and let me just get one here. So what you can do, right, if you open up a handful of screens, your back button starts to show up where you can go back, and it's just like, say Chrome or whatever. If you hit the back button enough times, it'll just take you back through every page you've had open.
Just like a browser.
What?
Just like a browser.
Yep, exactly, just like a browser.
So your list stacks
Yep.
chronologically.
Yep, so then say if I open, C102, C103, open up vaporization, open up this, and then I open up C102, 103 again, it'll just move up the list to the top, right? So you won't go back through it several times. And so then you can click back and go through all the displays that you've had open. You can also, if you long click, it'll show you all of them that you've opened, so you can just kind of go click if you want to skip a couple without having to click through. And then as well, that home button, if you click that, right now it's going to take you to this overview page, which sounds like a liquefaction page. So if you click that, it'll take you to that page, that home button there. This button over here on the side, with this, it's only one screen, so it's not going to be able to show it. But what you have is you can either swap or copy screens across. So say you have, you know, your C102, 103 screen and your liquefaction screen here, but you want them opposite. You can hit swap and you can just choose which screen to swap it with. And it'll let you swap. And the numbers will show up on what screens are what, and you can just choose to swap there. So in case you want to, I'm not sure, you know, how much you'll use it, but it's there if you want to, you know, try to swap those buttons.
So, on that menu bar, is there tools, I see?
Yeah.
If you go to tools, you can click print.
Yes, so yeah, you can.
How easily does that work?
So I'm not sure if you guys have a printer that's going to be connected up to this. I
See,
think
that's what
I'd have to talk to
know,
Chuck.
With the old SCADA one, there would be times when you'd be seeing something anomaly or something.
Yeah, something
And
weird.
we'd immediately print.
Yep.
And it was print, and then I can't remember if there's one more print screen, but it immediately spit out.
Yeah. So what it'll do here?
You know, for troubleshooting stuff
Yeah,
or.
no, I know exactly what you're talking
So
about.
I want that to be really easy.
Yep, so
because
yeah.
Sometimes these anomalies might be really quick, you know, and.
Yep. So yeah, if you hit that print
Get a
button.
screenshot of that really fast.
So you hit that print button, it just pulls up a
Okay.
print menu page, and it'll have, you know, the printer set up that will be connected to
But
it.
there needs to be one
Yep.
connected.
I'll talk to Chuck maybe when I'm there tomorrow, if he's there, and make sure we have a printer hooked up to them. So then we can just print directly to that when you do it. But yes.
But yeah, I would hate for that to be like, oh, where do you want to put it on your H drive first and blah, blah, you know.
Yep.
No, I just want it to spit out and hurry up, you know.
Yep. So yeah, it'll just say print.
So Sam, in that regard, what Dave's asking, so let's say I'm a little slow on the print, but can I go back, you know, 2 minutes in history for that screen and see the state of affairs?
So yeah, the history won't work as, say, on the graphics. So this is where your process history view and your chart builder would show up. So say if you did see something weird on tank pressures or things like that, you could build a chart and you can see exactly what values were. You can see what state things were in, what values things were, and stuff like that.
So print is really important.
Yep.
Yeah, you know,
That's
and like this, what you're saying.
Yep.
Typically, the Excel engineering guys.
Yeah.
Get the call to say, hey, build a super complicated chart that shows what all our variables were doing when this thing did that, you know?
Mhm.
And they're unreadable without a microscope at 8 hours of time to do it.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
exactly. You can make them complicated and stuff. They were doing it yesterday. on
Yeah,
site,
you
right?
see that one on the.
Yeah, they're making a-
Yeah, yep.
Kind of a
Saw that. That's
crazy
what-
trend. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. No, I agree with you. So yeah, this print. If you hit tools, print, it'll pull this up. We'll talk with Chuck tomorrow and get it connected up to a printer, so that you can hit print and it'll send the print right out to that.
So you can, on that chart builder.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a certain value up in the chart, if you wanna go back, like you were saying, print it out, well, can you go back in that chart builder and go back to the history of that,
Point.
whatever you're,
Yeah.
whatever point you're trying to go back in history and find out what that value was?
Yep.
Maybe a half hour ago, or
Yeah.
if there's something happened.
Yep. So yeah, like I said, we're recording data pretty much from when we put this thing on your site until, you know.
Even though you didn't have a current chart set up
Yes.
for that chart.
Yep. So the other thing that it'll also do, these faceplates have a, down here, I think it's like a 4-hour chart of your history of the data. So if you open up a faceplate, say for something, I mean, it's small, it might be tough to read, but you can at least see a quick overall trend, kind of right here, where the point has been and stuff like that. If you want to just kind of follow along with that trend, but if you do the chart builder, it'll open up and you can choose the time frame of how far back you want to go, and then there's a scroll button to just move back in time.
And so when I was on nights, I was messing around with
Yep.
that chart builder. track with real time. I eventually did it and I couldn't repeat it.
Yeah, so you mean like the trend doesn't follow with the most recent time, basically?
Right.
You kind of are
Yeah.
stuck viewing it.
Right.
Yeah, so if you basically go far forward,
To the end of the line, say
Yeah.
here, yeah.
it should follow along from there. It'll look, it won't like keep extending open area out on the end, but it should extend kind of the points on the end, and it'll extend through time that way. And
But your timeline will stay put.
so yeah, it'll be like a day time frame, and then that time frame will just move, it'll still stay a day length, but it'll just
Yep,
move.
well, that's fine.
Yep.
But the value would stay where I put that vertical line.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually but I wanted it to show me real time.
Yeah, so if you click basically far in front of it,
Okay.
it'll follow from there.
Oh.
Yep. If you just click in front of where the actual time is.
The vertical line will then revert back to
Yep.
its most current real-time data, and then it will then track and update as it goes on
Yes.
the bottom?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I was a little unsure of your question there. at first.
No, that's okay.
So, on these faceplates, kind of like, let me switch to a different display here. So there's little options with them. So these faceplates are going to have a handful of buttons on the bottom. And what these will do, let me try to think of one here. Let's do this one. We'll do our temperature control valve 302. This right now is just a manual loader. On site, we do actually have the feedback position on the valve, so it'll look slightly different than what you guys actually have there on site. As well as we'll open up a heater just to kind of see. So down here, on the bottom of the faceplate, you have buttons, and these buttons are going to be how, give you either data, ways to interact with the controls, or whatever else you might have, and they'll only show up there if there's actually data in them. So there's kind of a few different options here. You've got your module variables. So these are going to be values that
That's motor valve, sorry.
you're good. Just want to make sure we're not going over this later.
But it doesn't tell you what it is, right? Is that it?
What?
If you hover over OP, is that module variables?
Yep, it'll tell you operator
All right,
variables.
well, that's good.
Yep. So this module variables are going to be variables that operators can't change. So say either alarm limits or things like what output percent to do it. And we'll get, supervisor privileged accounts can change it, like INC guys. If you just talk to them, they can probably change it pretty easily as well. But these module variables are there more for you to kind of see what's going on. Say, oh, when does this, at what temperature is this valve going to open up? And it'll show up there, and it'll have the description as well as the value there. Operator variables are variables that you guys can interact with. So, I wonder if this will work. So this one, this low temps kind of cutoff valve, I think is what people were calling it, has two ways you can do it. You can open or close your valve this way, and either it's going to open it to 100% or close it to 0%. But you can also, still change it to different percent. But if you click it, it'll do it. It'll change it to 0. Open it, change it to 100. So operator variables are variables that you guys can interact
Now,
with.
again, that ain't telling you that valve actually moved at all. That's just saying
Correct.
that is what you told it to do.
Correct. So on these valves now, we do have feedback though.
Well, there is.
Yep. So that was something we added earlier this week. So you will see a bar telling you what percentage the valve is actually open on these faceplates.
Yeah, because you can operate it with that horizontal arrow.
Yep. So you can also kind of drag this one around. and it'll change it. You can hit these up and down buttons to change your output, as well as type it in. So there's a couple different options there to kind of move those things that you can interact, and it will now on site it will tell you what the value, what the position of the valve actually is, so you can make sure you actually know it opened.
So was that kind of a late breaking, definitely want feedback, or?
So yeah, it was something we decided, more recently that we wanted feedback, as well as the valves that we're using were able to communicate through protocol what position it was.
We all decided this years ago when we didn't have that.
Yeah.
I was like, so when I had initially heard that we weren't gonna have feedback, I was like, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Only on some valves, so.
Yes. So yeah.
So is there something on the faceplate, Sam, that reflects
Right.
whether or not that's a controller signal or an actual component position?
Yep. So let me see if I can open up a different one here. So I was going to go over this a little bit later, but might as well just talk about it now. So a loop faceplate has a couple different things. So that horizontal bar at the bottom, that's going to be your output. So say your valve open up 0 to 100%, or this much firing rate on your boiler, or whatever else, right? That's your output. But then if you have an input into it, that'll show up in this vertical bar, and it'll be a range from whatever your scale is. So in this case, it's 0 to 563 gallons per minute, and that'll show up there, right here. So this one doesn't have any feedback, which is why you don't actually see that vertical bar. This one does have feedback, which is why you see that. And so like I said, on site now, this does actually have a vertical bar telling you what position the valve is in.
On that faceplate there, if I'm seeing that correctly, it looks like you can dial your gallons per minute down to say 400.
Yep.
And the control valve will follow that.
Correct.
Wow.
So yeah, it's how these loops work, right? So you can change either your output or your set point. Your set point will typically, like this case, I want it to go to 500 gallons per minute, and the valve will just open and close however much it needs to, and then try to find that happy medium where it's open this much, 500 gallons per minute goes there. Right? It does that. Try to do it quickly, with tuning and different things like that, kind of getting it the reaction to be the right time. And so, yeah, those are kind of the main kind of ways you can control a loop, would be through that.
Gosh, that makes me wonder if there's procedure updates that can take place now that is that way.
Yeah,
You know,
because you guys used to
because
just
we
like,
never had that before.
you guys would just open the valves, right? You'd be like,
Or look at a different variable to it,
yeah,
Whereas if we can control that.
yep. So yeah, say like a level in a tank or something, right? I don't know, I think this D100, you could set what percentage you want that to be at, and that valve will control how much level stays there. So it's kind of and then like I said, it's kind of almost not necessarily, but almost a set it and forget kind of thing. You control it to this, and it'll control to that. You want to monitor things and make sure pressure's not building up or whatever, but you could kind of trust that level will stay where it's getting controlled to. So the other buttons you'll see kind of on here would be an I button, which is an interlock, and the interlock will typically shut down whatever let's say a valve or a motor. It'll either close it or open it based on what it normally is, or shut down, say, a pump or a compressor or whatever. And so if you open up that I button, what it'll do is it'll give you a list of all the interlocks. So on this one, the only interlocks for the heater is from a plant shutdown, as well as the actual boiler fire eye is telling you that there's a trip. And then you'll see that there. It'll interlock, and it'll shut down whatever it needs to. And then if there is an active interlock, I wonder if this has it.
So the interlock's telling you what maybe tripped that
Nope.
device or that loop? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yep. So it'll tell you. So there's going to be also I wonder if it's on here. Okay. So what it'll also tell you, there's going to be a first out area on it. And what this one will do, it'll, say like a plant shutdown occurs, right? You lose power to a bunch of stuff from doing that. So then not just the plant shutdown will trip, but kind of like everything else. Say pressure goes down or whatever else happens that might cause a trip. All those start coming in and you'll see them on the interlock page. The text will highlight, but there'll be a red arrow like you see here next to this PSD push button at the 50-foot valve. That red arrow will tell you this is the first thing that came in, this is what actually tripped it. So yeah, that first out button is pretty important. And then if you reset it, that arrow will go away. But if you don't reset it, if you start running again and then it trips again, that arrow will move to the most recent thing that caused it to trip.
Can you pull up that screen for the key?
Yep. P111.
This is where we should see like can temperatures and stuff like that.
So yeah, you'll see also there's like more tabs if there are more interlocks than there. So we've got like the discharge pressure is high, the flow is low.
I guess I'm looking for a start interlock screen, is that a thing?
Oh, yep, a permissive.
Oh, permissive.
So yeah, the next thing is our permissive screen. So these basically need to be, not in there. You don't need, these conditions basically need to be met to allow you to run.
Once you click on.
Oh, yeah, I'll
Yep.
get to that.
Yep, it'll
Yeah,
be the P
You
button.
weren't over like P111, you were over at eight, right?
Yeah, so I just moved this faceplate over. So this is the P111 faceplate.
Okay.
And if you open up this, the button that says P,
Permissive, okay.
yep, it'll say, if you hover over it, it'll tell you permissives.
Okay.
And that'll tell you there what there are. Right now, like I said, we don't have any active, but it'll show up here, right? The can temp is okay. The vent temp, it's not ready, all these things. Those will show up there. And so then you have to, clear those or get those resolved before you can actually start that.
So it'll
So that's
tell you-
something that we, even when we're in vaporization season, we keep those permissives met all the time.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have an impending vaporization.
Yep.
So,
Yep, so it'll be there.
Everyone thinks we're not doing anything on nights, we're actually maintaining these permissive values in, by cycling level and P100 and whatnot.
Yep. So you'll see these buttons, so an interlock or a permissive, you can kind of see it under the I button up here. It's flashing red underneath it. So that'll tell you that there is like an interlock active or anything like that. As well as you'll kind of be able to tell if this mode says LO. It's called local override. I always kind of think about it just saying locked out, meaning you can't do anything with it. If you try to start it, it won't start. If you try to do anything, it won't. So it's locked out in my brain. I know what it is, but I still say locked out when I see it. So,
You had that before?
What's that?
Were you able to see what was holding you over?
Like,
On like the permissives?
permissives, we could, yeah,
Okay.
on those pumps, like on 111, 12, 13.
So, the other buttons that I think would be kind of important would say they will be either, they'd say AC on them. So I'm looking at the heater over here on the right side. This is your actions. So this will basically tell you an action that would occur, and it'll tell you what the action does. So if that button's kind of lit up, kind of like that interlock is, that tells you that an action is active right now. So this one is basically like a reset horn. So if you guys set the, if the horn comes on, there's an option to reset it. And if you do that, that action will light up telling you that it's resetting it. That's pretty much it. So you'll see some of those buttons as well there. Necessarily you don't need to see them unless you're more curious about why something might start and stop at certain times or things like that. Those actions will kind of show you what they do. Let me see if it. So like on this P111, I just clicked the AC, not the numbered one, just the first one. And so like this is kind of where it'll tell you. So there's an active action right now where the pump is stopped. So there's no longer the pressure interlock. It's disabling it, and so that's what it'll do. It'll tell you kind of what's happening there if you want to see it. Like I said, a lot of that stuff's kind of background, but you're able to at least see what's going on. And then you might also, so the heater, I mean, this is kind of, we've been looking at it this week, so it's kind of fresh in my mind to show you this. But you might also see buttons that you're kind of like, this isn't any of the other ones, what does this mean? Like this heater has like a CAF button and an FS button. That's your combustion air fan and your flame scanner. It's kind of what we're going. And that if I hit that combustion air fan button, it'll open up the faceplate for the combustion air fan or the FD fan for that heater. But if I hit the flame scanner button, it'll open up the display of the fire eye, telling you kind of where it is in the sequence during the light off of the boiler. And it'll tell you kind of this message and logic status and status. It'll show up there. Flame scanner.
Oh.
Yep. We can change that too if we want to. If we want to call it like FE for fire eye or whatever else. Just let us know if you guys don't remember or want us to make it easier. Some of those changes are pretty easy to make, so. So the next faceplate you'll see specifically related to C102 and C103. We call them equipment module faceplates, but they're basically your sequence faceplates. So these faceplates, so I clicked right here under, it says C102 sequence. Underneath C102, I click that, it opens this up, and this tells me basically what state my sequence is in. So I'm in idle right now. You say what the sequence is, who owns it. So in case it gets owned by somewhat like a different sequence, but you guys aren't going to run into that, it'll always say operator for you. And then under here you can select your run command. So if it's running, if it's idle, you have start and stop. If you're in the process of the sequence of starting up the compressor, there's a stop and a pause. The pause will just kind of hold you, it'll shut everything off, but then go back basically into the sequence quickly to where it was last. And then once you're already started, you can hit stop and it'll do it. I don't think this will work fully, but if you drop it down, you can see where you're at if you hit start and then you hit this basically play button. It'll go through it and it'll kind of start everything up. Looks like it's not going to start everything. And so if something fails in it, what you'll see is it will start flashing here, yellow, and it'll tell you you're going to pause or hold. You might see as well. And what that means is an error happened and it went through this as well. And I kind of was talking during it, but it'll tell you what was the reason it went to hold. So those are kind of the big ones, big faceplates, as well as in this case specifically for you guys for C102, 103. You do have different faceplates for the compressor motor as well as the loading on the compressor. So the sequence kind of can take care of all this for you. You hit start on the sequence, it'll start everything and load the compressor to 50%. And if you stop it through the sequence, it'll just load it down to 0% from wherever it's at and stop everything that it needs to. But say if you need to change something or you just want to get it started and you want to start the motor first, it's not going to actually load anything or start the pump from here. You have to start the sequence to get all that stuff to happen. But it's loading. I'm just going to force a couple things to show you guys. You can hit this load 50% and it'll go to 50%, and then you can choose to go to 100%. And then you can go back to 50 and back to 0. Back to unloaded. So those are kind of the face plates you might see. We'll go over a little more detail here, but let's take a quick break so I can stop talking. So I'll take maybe 5-10 minute break and just get back to it.
10 for sure.
Too long to go over teaching wise, so we'll get started here again then. We're going to go on page 12. Page 12 is where we're kind of start here next. This is the GEM overview. So like I said, remember GEM it's just the graphical representation of an instrument in your field, right? So if it's a valve, it's kind of the representation of a valve, a transmitter there as well, or a motor or anything like that. So what you'll see, and this will kind of show it, but there's the actual image, either the value or like the valve. So I'm going to look here at this. I'm going to change this to our friendly name again. So this is our WEG floor heat valve, right? So over here, there's going to be, it's typically not being able to be seen, but it's a box that'll be around it telling you kind of if it's an alarm. So that box will be the color of whatever the alarm is. So we can see a few different colors here, right? Like this, the P108 has a red box around it. That 8-inch meter building pressure has a yellow box around it. And the C102 motor has a purple box around it, right? So red, critical, yellow, warning, purple, advisory is the kind of thing that's talked about a little bit later in the book. But so that box will show up only when you're in alarm, and it'll flash if the alarm's been unacknowledged. So say if that alarm comes in, say you have a high temperature alarm, that box will be flashing until you acknowledge it, and then it'll just stay solid.
How did you open that WEG for?
This one? Yeah, it
Oh,
could.
so that's new. That's never been hooked up to SCADA before.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know.
No, you just used to fail the air to that.
Oh, really?
Fail it or open or close the air supply to it, and that's how we run it.
And that might be what this valve is, but
Oh, and maybe just say, can I control it? It's grayed out.
no, you can open and close it.
Oh, good.
Yep.
I never could do that before.
Okay.
The ball valve.
You had to go out there and-
In or out, right?
Yeah.
Not good means.
Yep.
Not nothing crucial, it's just an extra load on the light system.
So,
Stabilize temperatures.
cool. I guess I didn't know for sure. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with, like, the old system.
Yeah, and that's kind of why it explains why it lives where it does, because it's never been on a graphic before.
Mhm.
There's really no good, I mean, maybe you could put like somewhere.
Yeah. Interesting. So a couple other things you'll see will be, so on this pressure right here that I clicked, this right after the E104, which is your C102, C103 section pressure control. This you'll see, it has a red box in there, and then there's that red kind of circle X. That means that you have a critical alarm there. So that's what that box means. And that's why you see a yellow triangle over here on the 8-inch metering building, meaning that you have a warning alarm. So that's just another way to see what that one is. So that blue box that you'll see there basically means that the device is in a different mode than normally operated in. So say a valve is normally operated in cascade, it gets told what to do by something else. And so I switched this WEG floor heating valve to auto, and you can see that blue thing stayed up because it wants to stick in cascade. And we'll go over modes later. I know modes have been confusing. It's a little different than what you guys used to have, so we'll touch more detail on that in a little bit. And then that purple box will mean that you have some kind of error in the controls itself. Say like an IO point's bad, or there's some kind of issue. Like this one is because it's in IMAN, which of course we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's just some abnormal condition in there. That's when that purple box shows up.
So that's not an alarm condition, Sam, that something is just not.
Yeah, it's just
right
it's just abnormal, right?
Okay.
That's
So-
beyond the operator's capability at that point, correct?
Yes. Yep. So that one's more like, hey, this is abnormal. INC, what's wrong with it? Excel engineering, what's wrong with it? Or whatever else, something like that. So let me go to a different valve here, just to take a look. So you'll also on these control valves, so like an analog valve, 0 to 100%, it'll tell you what percentage you're commanding it open to a couple ways. It reads out the percent. It's a little small to read right now, but it reads out 2% down here. This one might be easier. It says 100%, and then they also have a little box, kind of fills up based on what percentage you're open. If you want to see it quickly, there's just a couple ways to do it there. And then kind of like we talked about, up top is either your module name or your friendly name, kind of whatever you have it set to. And so one that, red is either off or closed, and then green is open. This is kind of the process we're using. I think one of the operators, Eric, was saying that where he used to work, it was the opposite. Kind of depends on the industry you're in. But so we're doing green open, red closed, or green on, red off, is the kind of way to say it. So what you'll see is then on, say, this valve, if you kind of watch it up here in this corner of the screen, so you'll see that there's kind of two boxes, and on page 12 it has kind of you can kind of see a couple different states of the valve. That third one, all of it should be red, but so the top bar is basically what you're telling the valve to do. It's your set point. So right now my set point is open, so if I switch this to close, you'll see that top bar switch to red. And then the rest of it will switch to red once we know that it's closed. Once, like, say, our closed limit switch gets hit. And that yellow, it'll be yellow if we don't know what it is. So say your valve is traveling from open to close and takes a while, it will switch to that undefined with yellow, being, hey, I don't know if I'm open or closed or what I am right now. So I'm undefined. And so say if your valve takes too long to travel, that's kind of what you'll see. Or you just don't know which one it is. And that typically means like your valve got stuck or something like that. But as you see, there's a time limit here on this, under the state transition. And that's how long you have to change state. So I have, in this case, I have 10 seconds to open this, for this valve once I hit open, for it to tell me it's open. If I hit open, it only takes about a second because it's simulated. But so like yesterday, we were working on the 50-foot valve trying to open it. And the timer on that is 600 seconds. So you have 10 minutes for that valve to open. We weren't getting it within 10 minutes because I never actually was actuating because it needed to be reset. But you'll see the timer go up and count down, and if it gets past that 10 seconds, it'll give you a fail alarm, and then it'll tell you kind of on this bottom here where it says fail alarm, it'll tell you, travel time exceeded, or open confirm lost, or stop confirm lost, or something like that. Tell you, hey, either we lost our limit switch, or we just never actually traveled in the time we needed. It's kind of what you'll see there on those valves.
So Sam, that timer function would only be applicable if you've got actual feedback, so open
Correct.
and close limits, which is
Yep.
whatever.
Yes.
So did I hear you correctly? We actually put feedback on the 50-foot? I thought that was going to be next year.
So it's not, from what I understand, yes.
Okay.
From what I've understood on site is, yeah, we have it. We can tell it to open and close, and it'll read back if it's open or closed. I don't know if we have both limit switches or just say an open limit switch at the moment, but I know we do have some amount of feedback on the 50-foot valve.
So in the example you were using, if that valve were to get stuck into intermediate,
Yep.
the valve would indicate all yellow? Is that what it would do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So it'd be yellow, meaning, like I said, it's undefined. It doesn't know what state it's in.
Yeah.
It would be yellow after the 600 seconds.
Yes. Yep.
600 seconds, it'll show a green bar on top.
Yep. It'll show you what basically your last state was as it's doing that. Yep. And so then say for some reason, like the wiring went bad on both your limit switches and they both came in as one, they say, hey, both of our limit switches are active right now, then it'll be like, this is wrong, and it'll switch to yellow. So something like that. So typically if you see that yellow, either the valve got stuck or there's something wrong in the field and you'd have to go take a look at it.
Did they get that 50-foot valve open this year?
I don't know, not when I was still there.
Yeah.
I know
That-
Kyle needed to go do some
So-
magic to reset it.
They were testing ESPs at the plant yesterday.
Yeah, right.
And so 50-foot valve went closed. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, well, so we went out there to look at it. Here, there's this new operating, or like station out there.
Yeah.
Kind of didn't know how to use it. And I don't know, yeah. Kind of one of those things that just showed up that you need to know about. And is that in a procedure? There's never been.
It's not in the procedure, we didn't even.
Yeah, it's like, Chuck, there's like a joystick and a plunger on there that says pull to reset. You know. Stand up, what it is, you know.
Okay. Right.
All right, so moving on here, we're gonna look I know we kind of touched on a couple of things specifically with faceplates. We're gonna kind of go over a loop faceplate, so like a control valve that's controlling on something, as well as a pump valve and pump faceplate and a valve faceplate. So a loop faceplate, like I said, it has a couple different things here. It has a vertical bar telling you what the value of your variable is. And you'll see that under PV, which we referred to as process variable. That process variable is, like I said, in this case, we're looking at the flashback differential pressure control valve. It's PSI, and it goes 0 to 25 PSI. So on this, you'll typically see this black kind of arrow pointing in, and that's what your set point is at. You can drag this to change your set point. So right now our set point's at 25. You can drag it to move it this way. Let me switch it to the correct mode here.
So why is it called
A loop?
What is the loop?
So yeah, the loop-
Is the loop delta V two component back to delta V? Is that the loop? or-
Yes. So yeah, the loop basically is your your reading, like say in this case your differential pressure, and it's looping to the control valve. And what's the loop process of it is this, like the control function that's telling how much of the valve to open to change the temperature here. And it just goes through and continually changes, which is why we call it a loop, based on what the temperature changes to.
So in order to have a loop, you need some sort of feedback, right?
Yes, correct.
That's what I was
Yep.
trying to make it
Yep.
make sense.
Yeah, and so, some of the stuff is just like you said, good question. Like I just know it because it's what I work with, but it might not make sense to everyone.
And some stuff I don't, like jam, I don't
Yeah.
need to know that.
No, you don't.
Specific.
Yep. So yeah, like I said, so this PV is your process variable, like I said. So that's the value you're typically controlling off of. And so when I'm going to switch my set point to just say, I don't know what this would be, 12.5 or so. And you change your set point, and when you do that, your output changes to try to control the value to that set point. So say you have a level, like I said, you want the level to be 50%, and as your level increases, say you have like a dump off valve, so your valve opens to kind of let some flow off, and you close it when it gets there, and it kind of keeps doing that to keep it about that 50%. Or other way around, it's a fill valve, and it's and it's just kind of continually flowing out, and you just kind of need to open it to keep the level where you want it to do, and that's what that set point does. So there's three ways
Fancy Foxborough controller, that's what.
Mhm. So there's 3 ways to change your set point. Like I said, there's this drag function where you can do it, or you can just kind of drag it. It's not as exact, but it'll do it. And it'll just get it to where you drag it to. And then there's these arrows, just kind of like our increment arrows. And this will just typically move it by 1 value, up or down. So I hit it, it moves from 12 to 13. Hit it, say a couple times here. It'll move. I can move it down to 10 just by doing that, but it'll only move there by one engineering unit at a time. So say I want to change what this actually is saying. If I want to change it to 20, I should, 1 second. You click on the 10, what I should say, here. If I click that, it'll open up a data entry box, so then I can type what value I want. I hit enter, and it switches it to there.
Can you type decimals in there?
You can,
And
if
then will the box change this to upping 1 and lowering 1 in that decimal?
So no, it won't. Not originally. So some valves, I don't know, and it's something we can talk about if we want to make smaller adjustments with those buttons. But typically it's based on how big the scale is. I don't remember everything about it, but it's like, if the scale's like 0 to 10 or something, it'll change it by 0.1 or something. Like I said, I don't know off the top of my head how much it increments by based on how big your scale is. Because if your scale's 0 to 500, moving it 1 point at a time isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, so on the last side text screens, there would be the option to do whole numbers or decimal numbers, just like that.
Yep.
There'd be 2 sets of arrows, like 2 arrows up and 2 arrows down, whole number. 1 arrow up and 1 arrow down, like you said.
Yep.
You could do like tenths or half,
Yep.
kind of sit in either 0.1 increments or 0.5, and we do use that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll have to see kind of what we can do with that, because I think realistically, graphical change is a lot easier to make than a control change. So it's something we can definitely look at, but I'll make a note of it, and I'll take a look and see what we can do about that.
We've had people say, well, that valve ain't gonna notice a tenth of a change. It's like, well, okay, I'll do it, and let's look at the trend and now.
Yep.
You tell me, that, you know, we'll show you the difference in maybe, you know.
So, I don't know if you guys have maybe seen it kind of as I've been changing the set point, but you'll kind of see down here the output change based on what I need it to be. You know, so I put it up there to 25, and you kind of see my output here fill up as well as it tells me up here. So that's kind of where you'll see this control come in. But you can also just control the output of it in manual mode, and that will just give you control over the valve position. And this movement is very similar to what the you know, set point is. The arrow is just in a different spot. You can drag the arrow to open it up a certain percentage. You know, like I said, it's not an exact science dragging it like that. You can use these buttons, and that will move it one and up and down 1%, or you can type it as well, and it'll tell you the current value of what you have in there when you pull up this data entry box, as well as, you know, the smallest and largest value you can do it. And if you go above it, it'll tell you that the entry is too high, or if you try to go too low, it'll tell you that it's too low. Right, and we kind of talked about the chart builder a little bit more and some of these buttons down here. But these buttons that you'll see here are going to be the same that we kind of saw in the search function, where you can open up your detailed display, your primary control. So if I was on a different screen here, if I had this faceplate open on a different screen and say something's happening with this valve and I want to go check what's happening on that screen, and then I hit this red and blue button, it'll take me to that screen. It'll take me back to the page that it was on. And then the other main button is this acknowledge alarms. So you have a faceplate open and an alarm shows up. That acknowledge button will acknowledge the alarms that are active on that module, or on that equipment, I should say. And so this S here that you see here, you want to see on your system, that's a simulate, letting you know that the values are simulated, which is kind of what they are here. So moving on. So we've kind of showed you these valve faceplates. Once again, kind of what you could do with them, open, close them. A lot of the buttons and everything are very similar. Something also that I should have shown you last one, but I'll just show you now. These modes. You click the mode, it says it's an auto right now. If you click it, it'll give you an option to change the mode to whatever options you have. Like I said, the main ones you'll see would be cascade, manual, and auto. And after we go over here in a little bit, we're kind of done here, we'll talk more about what those modes are, because I think getting your head around what those modes mean was confusing for me when I was first dealing with them too. So these buttons, you'll see right now it's highlighted, the open. So that means that's my set point. So my set point for this valve is open, and then up in this, the big text up top will tell me what the valve actually is. So it tells me it's open right now. So right, if I hit my close to close it, it takes a second, but then it switches to close, and it tells me that it's closed. So right, it's kind of your set point, similar to what we saw last time, and then what your actual feedback is there. So motor faceplate is pretty much exactly the same as a valve faceplate, except instead of open close, you have start and stop. I think the heaters, we are saying enable disable for those. So you'll see, they work the same way of saying, start, stop, open, close, but it's just the wording's different, pretty much. And that's the only main difference between a valve and, like, say, a pump faceplate. Okay, so we'll skip ahead here because we've kind of touched on some of these things kind of as we're going through it, to page 16. So this is where we'll talk about our modes and kind of what the modes do and what they mean for it. So the most common modes you guys are going to interact with are going to be manual, auto, and cascade. And manual means that, like, the output of your equipment is set by the operator. So you won't see manual on a valve or a pump or anything like that, and that's because you are just telling those things to start or stop, and either the pneumatic pressure is opening the valve, or electronically you're starting to pump through the bucket. So that's why you won't see that manual on that, but you'll see manual on a control loop, right, where you can see the output. You're actually changing the percentage output of the valve, which is why that's manual. Automatic, or auto, as you'll see, is what the short version is. This mode, this is where the control actually sets the output of it. So this is where you set a set point. So say on, like, a loop, you're changing your set point to a certain value, and then the control is telling the valve what to do. And that's similar to, like, a discrete valve we kind of just were talking about, right? I'm telling the valve to open, and then my control system is actually making the valve open. Does that make sense? Those ones are kind of made backwards of what you guys are used to, correct?
Well, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. So
Yeah.
manual is where I feel like I should be putting in my number.
Yes.
But I can understand now why I'm putting in that number, but then it's automatically maintaining that.
Yep. So yeah,
While I'm sitting in front of it doing it, it's kinda,
yeah.
I'm manually putting in the number for it to automatically control
Mhm.
right?
So like I said, auto, you'll see, would be basically what you'll see on pumps and valves, and that's because you're changing the set point of that. You are saying open or close, and then the control system is saying, okay, you want to open, so I'm going to send this signal to it to open or close it. Well, if you're in manual on an analog valve, 0 to 100%, and so you say, I'm in manual and I want to open the valve to 50%, that signal basically just goes straight to it, telling it, go to 50%. So you're manually controlling kind of the output of what the equipment is doing in manual mode. While in automatic, you're changing the set point of what you want to be controlled to. And so then cascade is very similar to auto, except cascade means you're not setting the set point anymore. Some other amount of computer control system is setting the set point. So say you want a valve to open when a pump starts. That if the valve will be in cascade, so when the pump starts, the valve opens up. So it gets its set point from the computer telling it to instead of the operator telling it to. I know it might be a little bit to get your mind wrapped around, but if you guys have questions about those modes, let me know, and we can just kind of keep going through them. So, like I said, on these faceplates, you have a drop down telling you what modes you're actually allowed to go to. You won't have all the options, Because, you know, sometimes we just don't want a valve to be in cascade at all. Because we just want it to be in auto and manual. So you guys always have control instead of something else kind of starting or stopping it. So the other two modes you'll see, and these will mean something's wrong, is IMAN and local override, or like I said, locked out. I like to think of it more. So that IMAN basically means something's wired wrong. So let me go to a page where I know, I don't think it's going to show up on this one, but kind of just to talk about maybe a little bit more used to what your process is. The firing rate of your boiler is basically set by this. Sorry, that's the wrong one. It's set by this discharge temperature control loop. The output is your firing rate on your boiler. And this is kind of how you set it. But what you'll see is this will be an IMAN until the boiler hits like 120 degrees. And then you can change your firing rate. And that's because the wiring isn't connected until it gets to that temperature. So typically if you see IMAN, it's some kind of wiring issue with a control loop. And then local override, like I say, locked out means that you have an interlock active telling you, hey, something tripped this. You have to clear that trip before I will, let you unlock this. And what you'll see as well with that, I don't think it's all of them, but some of your, equipment needs to be, there's a reset button on the faceplate. So if you're in local override or if you're locked out from a trip and you might need to hit a reset before you can actually start controlling it again. So then the other ones that you probably won't see unless it's in a sequence is RCAS or remote cascade and then remote out. And those are exactly cascade and manual, but remote meaning that that's controlled by some kind of sequence. So your C102, C103 sequence that starts and stops your compressor, you might see it there, but I wouldn't imagine you guys will run into that very much at all. And then finally, the last one is out of service. You won't see this one unless an INC guy probably or an engineer goes and puts a quick piece of equipment out of service. Any questions on modes?
So that out of service one is this may be a question for Dave, but if you were to hang, a lockhead, tag out, clearance, whatever you want to call it on a component, would you then go into Delta V and show what is or out of service road?
It's something we could look into adding to do. It's not on anything right now, unless like say an engineer would go and do it.
I'm just thinking since you got this screen up, you got 113 pump, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
I mean,
And that's what I was wondering, if you were to open the breaker for P111, would it know that it hadn't shown on the circuit?
For like if you just like turned it off, the power off to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you would see is you'd lose basically your confirm. It'd go to yellow, telling you it doesn't know what state it's in.
But like what Tom's saying,
Yep.
P113 doesn't even have any power to it.
Yeah, so right now we've taken basically the control out of it from there. So the pump shows up grayed out right now. You can't interact with it, you can't do anything. It's basically just telling you, hey, it's there, but you can't do anything with it.
I'm just thinking the way you described it, that out of service mode seems appropriate if you were to take a component out of service, put tags on it, lock on it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you could use the two processes together.
Yeah.
That would be something you'd have to add into like a clearance or a tag section.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's take the breaker off. Okay, breaker's off now. Change your
Change the
V
mode
setting
on
to
that
on
component.
service.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that maybe a future thing would be a good addition. Right? For when work needs to be done on something to kind of let the operators know, hey, this is not put back in service yet.
you back to the boiler, you used an example.
Yeah,
So whichever boiler you had picked, but you said it was gonna be in a high man until like 120 and then it swaps.
correct.
Why wouldn't that be cascade until you get up to your temperature setting?
Well, so that's because the actual control of the boiler is taken care of by the fire eye.
Right, yeah.
So we don't actually, we basically are, we tell it to start to the fire eye, and then we don't get control over it until it kind of goes through all the sequence. And then we kind of call it a release to modulate parameter telling
Yeah.
us, hey, you can control this now. And we're basically waiting for that parameter. And that parameter is an actual relay that gets pulled in when it hits that.
I'm just thinking if I were the operator on there, I would get confused with IMAN meaning miswired.
Yeah, I agree
Right.
with that same thing based on
So,
how
yeah.
you presented it, a
We-
wiring issue.
Yeah, so we're,
Whereas in fact, it actually seems like a permissive.
yeah, so we're
Or-
trying to figure out what to do about that, because we figured that out yesterday, that we don't get that signal until it hits 120 degrees. So we're kind of wondering we're kind of working on something we can do to make the operators at least see, hey, you have to wait until this point.
Well, the simple fix is get the ops manual adjusted, put a note in there
Mhm.
that when you enable a boiler, mode will rotate.
Yeah.
So that way you guys know this is normal. When I hit 120, the mode should go to this.
Mhm.
We're not very good at putting notes in,
I know
you know, which I
was
that's a
working on
soapbox
that.
I step on quite a while,
I
you
know.
know, and people say, well, you can't put all the variables in. It's like, well, you can at least make people aware of it.
Oh, that's right,
You
yeah.
know, like what we're used to, caution, no, you know,
Right.
we don't do that.
Just so you're aware that this is normal or.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, Sam, you said they're addressing that one?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, that was something we kind of figured out yesterday of what's going on. So we're gonna try to figure out the best way to handle that. You know, something that we're at least are aware of and are figuring out what to do. So the last thing that we'll go over here in kind of training is alarms in Delta V. So alarms will show up, like I said, when a value is high or anything. And there's going to be two different types of alarms. We're on page 17 now, I should say. There's two different types of alarms that Delta V has. There's an absolute alarm and a deviation alarm. So the absolute alarm is just entirely based, hey, is my value that I'm reading higher or lower than this alarm limit? So if I have a high alarm at say 100 degrees, is the temperature I'm reading above 100 degrees? And if it is, I'll go into a high alarm. Well, deviation typically we'll use on a couple things. I know we're using it on the tank 2 pressure because we have 2 pressure transmitters there. So if the pressure transmitters get, I don't remember the value, get away from each other a certain amount, if say a half a pound or something, I don't remember what it is. Let's just say a half a pound. They're reading 2 different values by that much. It'll say, hey, there's a deviation alarm, and it'll show up and it'll say deviation alarm on your module. So the absolute alarms that you'll see, most likely, like I said, are going to be a low alarm, a high alarm, and then a high alarm. And typically your low and high alarm are warning alarms, and your high and your low are critical alarms. Meaning, hey, you get your low alarm, you have to interact with it before it hits your low, and that's typically when something happens, like something trips out or anything like that, and that's when you'll see that critical alarm come in. So each alarm has a different severity, and like I've kind of talked about here, you'll see it be critical, which will be a red color, a warning, which is yellow, an advisory alarm, which is purple, and there's another one called a log alarm, which you won't see, but what it'll do is it'll just log in your event historian, telling you that an alarm came in. You guys also do have a supercritical alarm, which is also red, but just has a higher priority and will show up higher on the alarm list. So we have tried, I'm pretty sure, not tried, but we went ahead in our configuration that if something gets tripped, say like a pump or a compressor or anything like that gets tripped at a certain value, that value is a critical alarm value on the transmitter. So say a pump gets tripped if your pressure is too low. That low pressure will be a critical alarm on the pressure transmitter. So you can kind of see it flashes to you a little bit more, telling you what was going on. And for critical and warning alarms, the actual horn might not be that third, but the speaker will actually make like an alert sound telling you that there's an alarm, and it'll beep at you until you either turn off the sound or silence it or acknowledge the alarm are kind of the only way you can do that. So
What does it sound?
I don't know.
Do an imitation.
Just a beep, constant beep.
So you said that's for critical and warning?
Yes.
Are they different audible noises for each one?
They are not.
They're the same?
They are the same. Just telling you that you get a new, and that only comes in when, like I said, when a new alarm comes in. If you acknowledge it, it won't, keep beeping at you. So the purple advisory alarms aren't going to beep because typically it means something's bypassed or, the alarm isn't necessarily as important to us. It'll still show up in the alarm list, but it won't do that. You won't even see anything with a log alarm as well.
How about the deviation, Sam? Does
The
that have-
deviation alarm will be depending on what it's configured as. By default, it's typically an advisory, but say I think on like the tank 2 pressure, it's a warning alarm. It's either typically a deviation will be a warning or an advisory alarm, depending on the severity of it.
Okay, but the
Depending on-
advisory wouldn't give you the
Horn.
audible.
Yep,
Okay.
it'll show up in the alarm list and it'll flash, but it will not give you the horn. Yep.
I did not see the deviation alarms listed in the alarm matrix.
Okay.
I may have missed it.
Yeah.
There would be a list of, I guess, the process variables or instruments that are,
Yeah. And maybe I'm misremembering.
it may have been there and I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
That would be a good list to have, I think.
Yeah, I guess I can look and talk to some people and see if what we've sent off and what you guys have.
I'll take a look at over lunch and.
Okay. Okay, does anyone kind of have questions about the alarm severity and descriptions of them? If not, we'll kind of just move on. So the next page talks about the alarm banner specifically. And like I've kind of brought up earlier, it shows your unacknowledged alarms first, and then ranked by severity after that. So if you have 10 alarms unacknowledged, and 5 of them are critical and 5 of them are warning, it'll show all the critical alarms and then all the warning alarms after that. And what you can do there, if you click it, it'll pull up the faceplate as well as the display that that alarm is on. So then you can kind of actually interact with your alarm. So as well, then on that alarm banner on this bottom right corner, there's a few buttons you can do. The important ones that will be interactable. There's this yellow bell, and that's how you acknowledge all active alarms on this current screen you're on. So say I have a bunch of alarms on this screen that were new unacknowledged alarms, and I hit this button, it'll acknowledge the alarms just on that screen. This next one is going to silence, either turn on or turn off kind of sound for horns for a certain amount of time, and that'll change based on your username. So if you log off, it'll get reset to whatever, be reset to turn on. And the next one is the silence horn. So if the horn's going off and you don't want to acknowledge the alarm right away, and you hit that, it'll turn the horn off, but your alarm will still stay unacknowledged. And then over here on the right, this little blue circle question mark is your alarm banner help. And if you ever have any, unsure of what the buttons do or what any of the alarms mean, if you hit that, it'll kind of give you all of this information telling you what to do. And then finally, this kind of 4 circles and kind of box there, that will show you like hardware alarms. So if a computer is turned off or any of our controllers or I/O cards or anything like that are having issues, you'll see the alarms there. And then finally, these 3 buttons here on the side, on the bottom, what they do is they're by default, these 2, they're kind of hard to see on this screen, so on the page they're there. They point out, it says faceplate and primary display. Those buttons, there's a little green check mark next to which ones are active. So if right now, since a faceplate and primary display is active, if I clicked an alarm in the alarm banner, the faceplate and the display will open. If I just have the faceplate button selected, then just the faceplate would open, and vice versa with just the display. This is kind of how you can do it. By default, and like I said, I imagine will be kept this way, would be to leave, both those will be turned on, so when you click an alarm in the alarm banner, it'll show up, it'll open the faceplate and the primary display. So like I've said, if you guys have more, if you guys are working and you're not really, don't really remember, all my talking, and you click that alarm banner help, that'll tell you a lot of information. As well as one other thing that I kind of forgot to mention about the alarm banner, it's in the alarm banner help, is if you hover over an alarm, it'll tell you what time the alarm came in, it'll tell you like the description of the module, and then what the alarm is and the severity of it. So you can kind of see that right here. Maybe a little better here. It tells you like, right, your time in, description, parameter, what the alarm word is. Like that would say if you have a low alarm, it'll say low alarm, and then your priority. That's kind of where you'll see that. Any questions kind of about that alarm banner?
So how did you get to that alarm?
Yep. So yeah, that alarm help comes in the bottom right corner. There's this blue
Yeah, I see that.
circle. If you click that, it'll just pull it out.
Okay, so when you said priority shows critical, which one is that showing?
So right here, so yeah, this one right now is showing you a warning alarm, but these are just kind of the options for it. You have your advisory, your warning, your critical.
I guess what I was wondering is can you show up an alarm banner for a certain point?
Can I like right now?
If I clicked on a certain point, will it show if that comes into the alarm, if that's a critical, if that's a warning?
Yep, so yeah, that will. Let me see if I can find one here. Oh, we're here. Okay, so here's a good one. So the tank 1 level. This is kind of a little hard to see on this screen, I think, and maybe get used to. But on this faceplate, so the kind of internal area that's kind of like white is a good range for your value to be, and then that little blue bar in the middle is your actual value. So then up top, there's a light blue, which is a warning alarm, and then a darker blue, which is your critical alarm.
Okay,
So that's where it would show you.
Module.
Yep.
Okay.
And then if you also click this detailed display, it'll tell you as well. So it'll tell you what's enabled.
Detailed display that you-
Yep. So that's this kind of magnifying glass button down here. And in there it tells you your limits. And then, but over here is kind of where the important thing is. It'll tell you if they're enabled. and then what their priority is. So we have a high limit at 60, and it's a critical alarm and it's enabled. So that's kind of a way you can see that.
The alarm priorities, I'm assuming that would be user adjustable if the plant decides, hey, that's not really a critical alarm, or vice versa.
Yeah, so it's adjustable, but not typically by an operator.
No, I get
Yeah.
that.
But yes, it will be adjustable by a different,
Okay.
privileged
That
user,
when you pulled
like an
up,
INC.
Like
Yeah.
a low level or low, was that a pressure that you just had on?
That was the level
Oh,
I'm
okay.
thinking.
'Cause I saw 0.5 and I thought, okay, so it's half a foot.
Yeah, so then that,
I was thinking half a pound, that doesn't jive, but okay.
yep. So yeah, you guys have any more questions? Otherwise, I'm gonna kind of stop talking and kind of pass around this mouse so you guys can poke around here, for free here. And then, not for free, I should say, but without worrying about, shutting things down or breaking anything.
Hey, Sam, one thing,
Yeah.
in some of the earlier training classes, we were talking about, so like a pneumatic valve that's got solenoids associated with it.
Yeah, I can show you that. Yep, that's a
That
good.
might be of value for these guys to see.
Yes, so let me go to the vaporization page. So a lot of these valves kind of off of the P111 and P112, they have a air solenoid valve that gets turned on or turned off to actually let the control happen to open the valve 0 to 100%. You need the instrument air to be there to actually operate it. So you'll see kind of up in this corner, there's a green circle next to the valve. I know it's a little further away, but next to this one, and then there's a red circle next to this other valve. And so that little circle is your air. Basically, if it's green, you have air to it, and if it's red, you don't have air to it. And that air will be turned on, typically, automatically based on if the pump's running or not. But a way you could get to this is on these loop faceplates. Like just click this, FCV P112. And then down here, there's a button that says SV for solenoid valve. And that'll open up the faceplate of that valve. And this is when typically we don't actually want to control this automatically because we want it to just do that. But if you see that there's an issue there, that's where you'd see it. So I'm just going to change this quick here. And then, like I said, if I close this valve, you'll see that circle goes red. And if I open that valve, that circle goes green again.
So that's not a solenoid on or off, it's an air available or not?
So it is a solenoid valve that supplies air to the control valve.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
Yes. So maybe a little, slightly confusing, but the idea is pretty much just to show that circle there is to show you if you have air to the valve or not.
How is it getting a reading on that air?
It's
Is it
just
actually measuring the air or the solenoid?
the solenoid, the position of the
Okay.
solenoid. Yep. So yeah, if your valve is actually, if we get an open limit switch, then that thing assumes that there's air moving through that.
Yeah, the distinction that I thought it was the condition of the solenoid.
Yeah.
Not whether or not there was air pressure on the actuator one way or
Yep.
the other.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a better way to say it. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, the idea is you're opening up the valve for the air to go in, and that's what the thing is telling you if that valve is open or not.
Since you get that screen, you may want, that's the mode lock thing, that might be of interest to some of them.
Yeah, so if you see mode lock, the idea is that the mode can't be changed. So there's something keeping that mode stuck at what it is. So these air solenoids, we want them to stay in cascade so that when the pump is started, then they turn on always, in case they get forgotten to switch out. So you might see that a lot, you'll see that a lot in those air solenoids, but you'll also see it maybe on a couple other things I don't remember off the top of my head. But typically, we don't want it to change out of that mode, and you can't. So it's mode
So
locked.
it's locked, but it is locked in, this one's in auto. But
Yep.
it can be locked in Cascade, and it can be
Yep.
locked in.
So yeah, like I have the privileges to do it, so I'm gonna turn it off here and switch it to Cascade. And I'll mode lock it in Cascade. Right, so you can set
Yeah,
that
that's
so.
good to bring up, because that can easily be interpreted as lockdown.
Yep.
You know.
Yep, so yeah, if you see
The
mode
reserve
lock.
valve, one of the pumps is in particular, that was a recent change with Minox, right? That they didn't want that to be operator adjustable on the mid-flow.
Yeah, because I had recently done that.
But as supervisor, if I understand it right, still, if you have the right permissions when you log in, then you can, just like what you just demonstrated.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And I think that's Rich is the one who I believe had the
Yep.
permissions.
Yes. I don't remember exactly who, but yeah, there will be different permissions there. So, any other questions here? Otherwise, I'll kind of, I'll let the recording stop, and I'll give this mouse to everyone, and you guys can poke around and ask questions as you come up with them. And if you want me to show you something again, I can show you it again as well. But no, I think we'll be good. We can let these guys